You are listening to the Enormocast.
Now, we all know that Sportiva makes the best climbing shoes this side of the Parthenon. But it turns out that even the most dedicated dirtbags have to spend an ungodly amount of time on the flats among the sad, lost, lowland civilians. And that's where Sportiva's approach shoes come in. Legends like the Boulder X can comfortably scramble you up slabs, boulders, easy pitches until the big guns come out. And for when you're not actually in the mountains, well, as you peruse the hemp milk selection at the whole paycheck, nothing says I've climbed El Cap like a brightly colored pair of TX3s that are relentlessly scuffing the floor. Bellied up to the bar for that post-near-death experience beer, let them know those gobies didn't come from labor with a pair of impossibly lightweight TX2s. After all, isn't the day-to-day drudgery just a protracted scramble to the next climb? Whether you're actually at the cliff or just standing up in your best friend's wedding, you better be ready in a pair of multi-sport approach shoes from Sportiva.
Are you stuck in the partner zone, where that person you climb with is blithely unaware of your electric longing that's telegraphing through that stiff gym rope? Does she think of you as just another dude she schools in the bouldering cave? Does he tell his friends you're just like one of the guys? Well, break out of the partner zone and let that person know that your rock is in a hard place with a special gift from PeterWGilroy.com. Because if you thought making sure her chalk bag was always full, or buying him a set of cams for his half birthday would bring out the passion, you're wrong. Do it the right way and go to PeterWGilroy.com for rock-inspired jewelry and accessories that say, to me, you're more than just a solid belay, baby. And of course, remember to enter Enormo at checkout for a discount.
We gotta get
Listen, where you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
big
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,006?
You really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing them with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime is good for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is about 11 o'clock a.m. on the 24th of April, 2018. Yes, we're recording this in the morning. What a strange twist. This is what my day voice sounds like. Is it as bassy as my late night jazz voice? I don't think so. It's more in my nose. Can you hear that? I don't know why that is. Maybe the caffeine. Anyway, this is episode 149 of the Enormocast, a conversation with alpinist, writer, general creator, gym owner, guide, what else? Happy-go-lucky guy, Freddie Wilkinson. Got this one when I was on my tour up in the Northeast. Got some requests over the years for having Freddie on. Finally got it done. Sat in his mini house, the Shabin, and had a nice long talk with Freddie. That's coming up. But I've been meaning to give a shout out to my friends at the Climbing Zine, Luke Mihal et al. The Climbing Zine, they have a new issue out this spring. I think it's volume 12 of the Climbing Zine. And in there, there's a bunch of good stuff, including a tribute from our friend Andrew Bisharat to Hayden Kennedy. So go ahead and check that out. You can get a subscription over at climbingzine.com for like $20. I think you can get 2 for $30. Send one to a friend. Anyway, support those guys. They are independent climbing media. We love that. They're even probably more independent than the Enormocast. Hopefully they're making more money than the Enormocast, though. But yeah, Luke's making it happen. That's his business. That's his job. He's a writer and does the Climbing Zine and a bunch of other stuff. So good on you, Luke. Keeping the dream alive. So help him out. Head over there. Check out the Climbing Zine. Maybe get a t-shirt, Dirtbag State of Mind t-shirt. These kind of endeavors don't exist without your patronage. Patronage. Do we still use that word? Is there matronage out there? Anyway, see how sensitive I am at the Enormocast? Matronage. Let's call it matronage from now on. Or is matronage patronizing? Man, so complicated. What else? Just had the 5 Point Film Festival here in Carbondale. It's kind of why I'm running late. Big weekend. I actually was not involved officially, other than I did a live interview, which I think I'll put out next with a couple special guests. And I brought the mobile studio to the van rally, and frankly, I thought people would be more impressed than they were. I thought there'd be, some sort of blaring of trumpets and people gathering around and cheering, but that's not exactly what happened. We just stood around on a semi-cloudy day and drank some beers. People walking up to the door and peeking in seemed a little freaked out, actually. Like, I don't know what they thought they'd see in there, but yeah. No accounting for taste, I suppose. One last thing before we talk about Freddie a little bit and get to the interview is we have stickers. The Royal We has stickers. So send me an address and I will send you stickers free of charge. Just do it. But if you do email me at chris@enormocast.com, please print your address exactly how it should appear on the envelope. With all the commas and the capitalization and your name on it. Don't make me look back to your email address to figure out what your name is. Sometimes it's not even on there. So, yeah, get it right. Makes it easy for me to copy and paste. That's what we like to do. Seamlessness over here. The internless Enormocast needs seamlessness. I have new stickers. Some think they're a little ugly, but I made them that way on purpose. I actually kind of researched stickers, looked around at these vans and trucks and things that have tons and tons of outdoor stickers on them, and I said to myself, what color is not represented there? What will stick out like a sore thumb? So that's it. I got new stickers that look like sore thumbs. And I still have the continuous style ones too. So send your address and you'll get stickers. Kind of hopped up here at 11:30 in the morning, aren't I? Okay, let's move on to Freddie Wilkinson in the interview. Not actually a lot to preview with Freddie. Kind of a journeyman climber, has made his way professionally in climbing through being a creator, writing books, a little bit of sponsorship, now a gym owner, and just, working it to make all sorts of things happen in climbing professionally, a little bit of guiding as well. We talk about that, how he's kind of pieced it together over the years just through his stoke and his psyche about climbing, but also a very accomplished alpinist. And I think his main feature is his stoke. He's just a guy that you want to have on an expedition to keep things going, keep the morale high, keep it light when it needs to be light. And also a great representative for you Northeasterners. Yes, I'm still plugging away at these Northeastern interviews that I got when I was up there. So you're welcome. You folks hunkered down in that dark, wet spring up there. I'm just making assumptions. I don't actually know that. But anyway, this one's for you and for everybody. An interview with Freddie Wilkinson. We're in the Shabin. Is that what this thing's called?
Yep.
Why is this? What's the deal with that?
Well, it started off as a shed, and then we realized we were going to have to live in here, so we upgraded it to a cabin.
Okay.
But our friends wouldn't let us get away with it, so it became the Shabin.
Yes, and we're like deep in the White Mountains here.
Yeah, we're on the southeastern edge of the White Mountains, central New Hampshire, right sort of where the lakes meet the mountains, and it's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah, it's awesome. I drove up the road and kind of crested a hill, and the view is incredible. And you guys cleared the land to have a little bit of a view and a space to build the new house, which is up the hill now. But this is a sweet space to do a podcast, man. It's totally awesome.
Yeah.
And let me tell me a little bit about this artifact again that we're sitting under.
Oh yeah, that's a piece of the Bridwell hut from the Torrey Valley in Patagonia. That the hut was taken down in 2007, and I happened to be there and rummaged through some of the wreckage and found that, and that has a bunch of carvings on it and Japanese characters and Italian characters. So I like to think that decades of angsty climbers have kind of, put their mojo and energy into that board, and that's kind of the spirit that blesses this Shabin.
Did you have any problems getting it through customs?
No, I like did one of those big saran wrap machines,
right.
And so I had it lashed to the outside of a duffel bag and saran wrapped it up and walked it right through.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know why, but it's, anytime you have anything weird and you get like some, overzealous dude, and it can just be a problem. It seems like whenever you're like pushing the boundaries of what you're supposed to bring back.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, so it's good. Anyway, but yeah, it's super cool. So I wanted to also open though is when I showed up, we introduced ourselves, but it turns out that I actually sort of met you. I think it was probably in 2008.
Yeah.
Would you have been in the Valley still then?
I was. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to set my scene. I was staying in the SAR site because of Brandon Latham, who was still on SAR then. He hadn't become the man, the gun-toting man that he is now in Yosemite.
A good man.
Yeah, good man. I love the guy. He's gone through the ranks, and he's head climbing ranger. Is that right, or is he
I think so.
LO, or LE guy?
I'm not sure. I think he is LE.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's always good to have friends on that side of the law.
Somebody that understands. But anyway, he had me staying there, and I was just kind of like, doing the thing where I was sleeping up behind his tent, and hadn't really been introduced to everybody in the SAR site, so I was just one of those guys that was hanging around. And big party one night, raging fire, the typical thing in the SAR site. And you're like across the fire, on fire, like just, going off. And I was like, who is this kid? Like, just, and so I'm also watching this other like large muscle-bound SAR guy who I went on to meet, Greg Lunowski, just get more and more pissed off at you as you're like fully just going for it, drinking hard, needling, getting in his grill, good old whatever. Again, I'm observing this as not knowing either one of you guys, and I'm assuming, okay, they're probably friends, and then he gets so pissed at something you were saying is that, and I have this wonderful image in my brain, he gets up and everybody's sitting on those big stumps, cut, and he picks one up. This thing had to, I don't know how much it weighed, like full on above his head, and you're like cowering. And he throws it and he just diverts it and like over to the other side of the thing. And again, as somebody who's like, okay, I'm pretty sure he's not going to crush this kid, but maybe he is that pissed off. Because he's got a visage that doesn't reveal that much about him. Anyway, so that was I was like, I didn't even really know who you were till later. And then I connected, I think seeing your books or just maybe reading about stuff that you climb. I'm like, that was that kid who was like almost killed by that other dude in the SAR site. And it's no wonder you don't remember that we were sitting across the fire together, because I don't know if I ever even introduced myself that night. So just watched it all go down. So
well, thanks, Chris. That's a good one.
I didn't intervene though. I apologize.
I know.
I didn't leap in front of the giant log to try to.
That's
save
okay.
you.
I wouldn't hold it against my friends if I got crushed by a lumberjack and none of them did anything to defend me. Pushing people's buttons has always been this thing I have a little bit of a talent for. And most of the time it's all among friends and just in service of a good laugh, but sometimes it goes too far for sure. So I'm glad I survived that.
So let's start with how you ended up in the SAR site. And were you actually on search and rescue then, or were you an interloper like me?
Nope, I was an interloper.
Okay.
And 2008 was a good trip to the Valley, as I remember. I was there on the site primarily through my buddy Mad Dog. And there's different Mad Dogs out there. So this is the New Hampshire Mad Dog who served on the SAR site and now is up in Alaska.
Dana.
Yep, Dana Drummond.
Cool. Yeah.
Not the Mad Dog I met on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, who is also a great Mad Dog. But anyhow, Mad
It's a good life when you can cite multiple Mad Dogs.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
you're getting around.
I feel like it's a prerequisite that if you're going to be a Mad Dog, you have to like give yourself that nickname.
Yeah.
It's a self-given, title. Anyway, Dana was a buddy from New Hampshire who I met around the time we graduated from college, 2005, 2004, and my main climbing partner, he had gone out there to the SAR site, and he was always definitely like a step above me in terms of rock climbing ability. He was that partner that we were pretty well matched, but like, he'd on site the 12A and I'd like take on it once. And,
Okay.
it was that kind of dynamic. And he went out to the SAR site and was totally kicking ass, and did the first thing he did was the Half Dome nose link up, and he went on to free Half Dome and free the free rider. And I was out there and I really wanted to do the Half Dome nose link up because that's what Mad Dog had done. And me and Greg, who was probably that muscle-bound lumberjack who almost crushed me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
We actually managed to do it at the end of that 2008 trip, like in like July 2nd. So that was awesome. That's what I was doing there.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back a little further.
Yeah.
You're here in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Grew up, so you're homeboy where we're at now, or was it somewhere else in New Hampshire?
Where I grew up?
Yeah.
I grew up in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
Down in the flatlands.
Okay.
Which, all of New England is kind of like California. So I, was about 4.5, 5 hours from here in pretty vanilla suburbs, little town called Durham that's halfway between Hartford and New Haven. And my dad was like the town doctor and, emceed for the library fundraiser. And so it was a very like, that kind of a childhood. But I sucked at team sports, and I got cut from the hockey team in 5th grade. And that was kind of the end of my career in organized athletics. And what I really liked doing was spending time outside. At first, just hiking and exploring around the sort of the craggy hills of where I grew up. And one thing led to another, and I decided I really wanted to try climbing. For 7th grade, for a Christmas present, my parents hired a guide from Eastern Mountain Sports. And when we were up here on a ski weekend, we climbed Mount Washington in winter. And that was the first time I had crampons on my feet and, used an ice axe. And it's pretty much just a long, cold hike. It's not like it's technical and you're belaying, but that gave me the first taste of mountain climbing. And
so had you been on did you go straight to that, or had you been on a rope as a rock climber at all or anything like that?
A little bit. Simultaneously to that,
Okay.
Prime Climb opened in Wallingford, Connecticut, which was, first generation climbing gym.
Sure.
Plywood panels, awkwardly concreted together.
Right.
And I was there the fall they opened, and took the belay class and would pretty much convince my parents to drop me off there, on weekends and, one school night a week maybe. And so I was kind of like first generation gym kid, simultaneous to being a, interested in mountaineering.
Right. Yeah. So to go back to your climb then, what was your impression of this long, cold walk?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. For whatever reason, I loved it.
Right.
Yeah, it's just, I really love being out in the elements.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, I'm not particularly athletically gifted, and, don't really excel at rock climbing or being a great endurance athlete per se, but I've always been done well with perseverance and, just being comfortable in uncomfortable places. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what mountaineering's all about. So,
Right. Right. So you kind of had a little bit, you said you were a first generation gym kid, but pretty quickly you had kind of this simultaneous, as you said, introduction to climbing in the cold.
Yep.
And that has a tendency to come later, and I don't think it often appeals to kids necessarily. Sounds like, because I was, opposed to hiking a long way even though I like the outdoors in a sense, but I could be.
Yeah.
It was hard to get me to go anywhere where I had to like do something like that. So
yeah.
And it just was in your personality that you just found this thing of like marching way up a hill was your jam. Yeah, and my parents tell this story of even I think like a year or two before we climbed Washington. I got a 0 degree bag from LL Beans, and we were on another ski weekend at Sunday River, and I went out behind the condo we had rented and into this snowbank and just dug this little snow cave and like spent the night out there. And it was actually like my grandparents were there, and they insisted that I dig it where they could see it from their window. And I just like spent the night out, like winter camped by myself, like 100 feet from from the condo. Because I got one for I got a really warm bag for Christmas, and I did the same thing. I slept in the front yard that night on Christmas night.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just like my parents were like, okay. Only I just slept in the shrubs. Because there was not enough snow to dig a snow cave. So
That's colder.
I just slept in the suburban, like a homeless guy on the front of somebody's lawn that they would have called the cops on in the morning. That was me, like sitting out there in our yard. So yeah, it works.
Totally.
Yeah. So I mean, I wasn't completely averse to sort of suffering back then either. Although it was like a Midwest version of all that, where you'd go out in the woods and just. I don't know, sit in the woods, not really climbing anything.
Where'd you grow up?
This was in the suburbs of Chicago, a place called Libertyville, Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So I was definitely the only person sleeping in their yard in Libertyville, Illinois that night. Unless somebody was drunk and fell down. So, I mean, how old are you when you climbed the Mount Washington about?
It was 7th grade, so I was probably 12, 13.
Well, yeah, right. So now, I mean, did you flip a switch? What was your sort of next trajectory like in terms of wanting to climb and how you ended up doing it?
Yeah, I definitely knew like climbing, was kind of my thing, but I didn't do it, a ton in middle school and high school. Yeah. Unlike, friends who I came to know later who like grew up in mountain towns where you have some exposure to the sport and there's older people and dads who can take you out. I didn't really have that, so I would do it once a spring, once a fall. But I did, I learned to lead a little bit at the Gunks while I was in high school. And I kept doing like one winter trip to the presidentials a winter. And it was when I went to college that I had the chance to like really, climb full time.
Where'd you go?
Dartmouth College, which is what brought me to New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And Dartmouth has a great history in outdoor sports. The ski teams have produced tons of Olympians and tons of climbers, and from Dick Durrance to in the 1930s to guys Andy Tuthill and Lizzie Asher, really strong boulderer, went to Dartmouth and graduated a few years ago. So it was like a perfect match for me.
What was your cohort?
So my main guy was Bart Paul. He deserves a big shout out because he was the guy who took this spark I had for climbing and kind of threw napalm on it. He had grown up in Seattle where he did have exposure to like a climbing community. And he did a lot of his climbs with Miles Smart, who's now a AMGA guide over in Europe. And they were like these precocious high schoolers who, had climbed El Cap and went up to Canada and like ticked routes on the trophy wall on Mount Rundle. And so he came into Dartmouth like looking for a partner. I was really keen to climb and in pretty good general shape, but just had never thrown myself at like legitimate hard technical routes. And, either at the crags or the mountains. And Bart just came in and said, all right, let's do it. And we pretty much teamed up our first week on campus and started climbing a lot on Cannon Cliff in Franconia Notch. And from there, sophomore year, we ended up going to Alaska and climbing the Cassine Ridge on Denali. Junior year, we went to Nepal and did a couple 6,000 meter alpine style ascents. And I mean, climbing would have always been part of my life, but would I have become a guide and like climbed at a high level the way I have if it wasn't for Bart? Maybe not.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I often talk about the What the Fuck podcast on this because I, stole his format, lock, stock, and barrel. But he always talks in there about with music that you need like or you used to anyway, need like a gateway guy, like a dude that's, like you're farting around with like top 40 and whatever it is you hear, and then some older brother or an older brother of a friend says, no, dude, you shouldn't be listening to that crap. Here's what you should be listening to. Here's Led Zeppelin. Here's like all this cool stuff. And I feel like sometimes with climbing, it, again, you listen to music. You were a climber. Yeah. But, dabbling, kind of not. And then it feels like somebody usually comes along. Not always, but it's helpful when someone comes along and just like slaps you and says, let's take this seriously. Let's get after it.
And was that pure chance or like, were you predisposed to like eventually, go in a direction or whatever,
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. But I mean, your assessment is that maybe not. Maybe you had other interests. Did you have other interests? Like, what were you into?
Yeah, I mean, I majored in history and got a minor in international relations, and Dartmouth's like a serious place, and all the kids I was going to school with were like, they knew how to have fun, and they were outdoor athletes, but they also were gonna go on to be doctors and lawyers and get real jobs and live in the city. And at the time I was I just knew I wasn't going to do that. Right. And being all around it, like, just reinforced, my inclination.
Right. You're like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
It's too serious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, but, in retrospect, now I'm 38, and I think, some of the most important stuff is what you can achieve beyond climbing. And so I've kind of come full circle a little bit.
Right. So, and you graduated your undergrad there?
Yep.
You made it through. You weren't the climber that was like, so out of it, you're like, I'm gone.
It took me 4.5 years to graduate.
That's not bad.
Which was pretty good.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, nice opportunities in that, that era, because the Euro had just been introduced. So you could go to Chamonix and buy like a season pass for 600 euros, which was
at that time
$520.
Right.
And it was actually cheaper to be a ski bum in Chamonix than in a typical, Jackson Hole or a Rockies mountain town. And so Bart and I and Miles and others spent a winter over there. And that was the reason I graduated late.
Right. That's a totally awesome reason to graduate late.
Yeah. They were like, come on, man.
Again, if you don't, if you come back and finish it up, then, nothing's lost there. Because I have when I was in college, all my friends, once I started climbing with these guys, and they were like, all right, we're going to Yosemite next. We're going to take the next semester off and go to Yosemite. Yeah. And I was like, that, and they're like, you should come. I'm like, that sounds awesome. And called my dad up. I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm thinking about doing, blah, blah, blah. And he plays the game where he's just like, oh, that sounds great. That sounds like a super good idea. And we have this whole conversation. Then he says, but then you're going to have to figure out how you're going to pay for college when you get back. Because he was like,
oh, really?
Yeah, he was like 4 years. You get 4 years.
Yeah.
You get it done, you're great. You don't, you're on your own. Yeah. And that was like, he was just like, wah, wah, wah. Like, you can stick around. Rough. You can go, but you can, you're gonna get cut off. And he said it all cheerful. Because he was probably stoked. He's like, let's get this kid out of college. Like, it's killing me.
Parent psychology.
Yeah, so I didn't go. I ended up, but I did. I rolled a paradise and went over to New Zealand where I could do a semester, and so I could keep on the track.
Yeah.
So he was okay with that.
Yeah.
And so I got enough credits while I was there to like keep on my 4-year track and then climb Mount Cook and all those sorts of things. And that's when I used to dream of being a mountaineer as well.
Okay.
And had a great season there and climbed a bunch and you know, still pursued that for a few more years. But for some reason, I know why. I moved to Southern California, and I started rock climbing just way more and kind of never went back. But
yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with 300 days of sunshine.
Yeah, it's
year.
tough. Yeah, so, but anyway, but it's just kind of funny because I'm just finding all these parallels. Our yard sleeping, our vanilla suburban upbringing. But then, this split happens with you where you're becoming this, somewhat serious alpinist. And are you, you're over there in Chamonix. Are you over there climbing, some of the classics over there when you were in that scene? Yeah.
Nothing super test piece, but like we got Beyond Good and Evil, classic Mark Twight route. A year it was pretty fat, and all the great gully mixed routes on the Aiguille Midi and the Mont Blanc to Cool, and a lot of the classic ski lines, and as well. So that was definitely a formative time because I wasn't super comfortable with glaciers and in a big mountain environment. And the great thing about Europe and the Alps is they have this incredible telefreak network and train network where you can access real mountain, terrain and then be back in town in the evening. And there's really no place you can do that in the lower 48.
Right.
Canadian Rockies, and maybe pockets here and there. But for me, it was like a huge training session and a huge booster for other adventures.
What'd you think of sort of the mountain culture there compared to here?
Oh, I love it. I mean, it's different.
Right.
It's a different flavor of mountain culture, but it's, the Alps is the birthplace of it all. And it's still so, must do really if you're an alpinist to go climbing in the Alps. And, what else? I mean, it also taught me a lot about risk because in the Alps, because there's such easy transportation, it's easy to make a bad decision and like go up on the telefreak on a day when you're just psyched to get some, powder shots in, and then the weather comes in or it's bad avalanche conditions, and you're suddenly in like a very serious situation that in most other mountain ranges, it takes days and weeks to, get yourself in a similar situation.
Okay.
In Chamonix, you can just have one too many espressos and get too stoked. And then you're like, oh man, game on.
Right. And did you guys have any close calls for like anything super serious, or just this like impending doom sometimes that?
Yeah, we had our fair share of close calls. I mean, I remember one time Bart missing a turn skiing down after doing the couloir on the other side of the Aiguille du Midi, and ended up descending this heinous ice fall, and he had to we just lost him and we're back at the condo. Like, what happened to him?
Oh, really?
Yeah, at the little apartment in Shamsud, and he had down climbed this heinous drainage below the main ice fall to get back to town. And so that was a close call for Bart.
What did you think happened to him?
We thought he was either with another group behind us, or he was actually in front of us and had gone off to do errands. Oh. So, it's those are the dangers of, when you're young and you're in the mountains, you kind of have a posse mentality.
Right.
Anyway, but we survived.
Yeah, you totally survived. You're here to talk about all you guys did.
Yeah.
So, and was that just the 1 year?
So I did 2 trips to Chamonix. One, our Dartmouth was on the quarter system. So that was actually really handy because I took classes my freshman summer and basically cranked out 6 straight quarters of college. And then had the spring, my sophomore spring off, and went to Chamonix, and then we had gotten a grant from the Mountaineers, I believe, to go up to Denali and try the Cassine Ridge.
Okay.
And we did that, and those were great days.
So I always ask this question, but I'm asking anyway. So coming from this suburban style, I was just telling you about my dad.
Yeah.
You know, his way of sort of keeping me on track. What was that in terms of your expectations or your parents' expectations? Meeting them, were they cool with it?
They definitely had their issues with climbing at first. I was really lucky in that my family could pay for my college education. Mm-hmm. So that was that
was mine too, right?
Huge advantage. Yeah. And, but in terms of the climbing, I was working jobs, saving up my own money for the trips. My parents were kind of just doubting the whole point of the endeavor. Mm. And I remember I asked for a pair of ice tools for Christmas, freshman year. And they were like, okay, this is getting serious with the climbing stuff. What's the deal? And
that's so awesome. I got a X15 for Christmas one year too.
Yeah.
Just one.
Just one.
Yeah.
Okay.
They didn't really get it.
That's sounds like your dad.
Yeah, well, they also...
I bet it was on purpose.
No, well, maybe you're right. I never thought of that. But yeah, what can he do with one? It's like, no, I'll do it with one if I have to.
And one crampon.
Yeah, one crampon and 1 foot. And no, I think they were astounded at how expensive they were, which is a joke because compared to now, they weren't expensive at all.
Yeah.
So I think they were just like, well, we'll get him one and then he can deal with it and get the other one. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
But anyway, by sophomore year, we were writing grant applications for the AAC fellowship grant, and Dartmouth had a grant. And I remember telling my dad, I'd just come back from Alaska, and I was like, oh yeah, and it looks like we're going to try to go to Nepal in the fall. Uh-huh. And he was kind of like, time out. And and but I had this binder of our grant proposal, and Bart had done most of it in honesty, but I was like, no, this isn't just a seat of your pants operation. We're fundraising, and here's our pitch. And he looked at it and was like, oh well, at least he's writing and hustling to get money. Mm-hmm. And that's always been one of my favorite parts of the expedition game, is the research and the storytelling component, the fundraising component, the all the stuff that goes into making the trip happen before you leave. It's a lot of hard work, but it's also kind of nerdy, and it feeds that side of my of my personality. So Dad eventually got cool with it. And I graduated, and I moved over from Hanover to the North Conway area in Mount Washington Valley, and kind of made this my home base. There's
a certain amount, I guess, in your personality of audaciousness, it sounds like. And what I mean is that, well, for instance, my thing where I was like, go to Yosemite.
Yeah.
And he put this financial thing in front of me that I made a calculation. I was like, I don't know if that's... I'm not down with that. Yeah. And doing this project all the time, I hear from people that, would have gone. And maybe you're not that person either, but they would have been like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it, and I'll work it out later. And sometimes I see those points in my life where I'm just like, and because of my dad, he kind of screwed me up in that way, or maybe didn't, however you want to look at it. I have this responsibility thing that keeps coming back.
Sure, you're just a well-grounded Midwesterner.
Yeah, exactly. But it's then I sort of fantasize, well, what would have happened? Who knows if I'd have, that would have been my path to climbing greatness or whatever, instead of muddling around where I have.
Well, don't overestimate climbing greatness.
I know, exactly. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I know. But back to you, the other thing is I kind of have always looked at these grants and all this stuff. And at that age, I would have thought, oh no, those are for people doing serious this and that. And they're not for a climber like me who's just, doing his climbing on his own. And you guys were like, no, screw it. They'll give us money. We'll do these grants. And it seems kind of I don't know, a level of confidence, a level of audaciousness. And maybe because you guys drove each other with it. But would you say that's anywhere in your personality, just to be like, you know, I'm going to take whatever avenue I need to do to get to this point?
Yeah, I think that I definitely know I have a tendency to, throw myself in on the deep end in terms of projects and undertakings. I'm not sure why that is. I just I've always enjoyed having a lot of irons in the fire, and sort of that way, especially it just suits the, sort of the modern like freelancing career lifestyle anyway. You want to have a diverse skill set. And I knew I loved the mountains and climbing, and I wanted to, find a way to, do it professionally or full time. And yet I didn't have one obvious way forward where like I was getting, offered huge sponsorships, or like I didn't really see going the full international guide route as being that appealing. And so I've always just kind of been the kind of person who does a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Like I've guided part-time in the winters, freelance writing, working with sponsors, but not, exclusively, and just kind of patching it together.
So what was kind of your first step to that, do you think, when the grant writing was getting your trips paid for, but and then you had to finish school. And, what do you think was your first step towards, like, I'm going to make this?
Well, first step was being like a dirtbag seasonal guide.
Okay.
And I loved that lifestyle. I was really lucky to meet a great group of friends, including my future wife, Janet, who had all gone to different schools around the New England area, but we were all really fired up about climbing. And we all kind of coalesced and moved to the Mount Washington Valley around the same time, 2003, 2004. And that was like the aforementioned Dana, Mad Dog Drummond, Bayard Russell, who later became my partner in Cathedral Mountain Guides, Emily Lee, who's a great climber, artist, free spirit dirtbag, who's done a lot of great climbing art, Sarah Garlick, who has written a book about geology for climbers and is just a really smart scientific person and great climber, and Tim Kemple. There was like this great crew of people, and we moved here and just got jobs guiding, waiting tables, and working carpentry, and tried to climb as much as possible.
Here in North Conway?
Here in North Conway.
Okay. I thought you were actually from New Hampshire, but as far as us in the West are concerned, this is just one big state up here that...
A little bit.
I know there's some borders and there's some differences.
Yeah, and different cultures,
as far as we're concerned, it's all one big thing. So you did travel all over the world. You traveled all over the West. We met quote unquote in Yosemite.
Yeah.
Why?
I know.
Why stay here? Why was
that's a good question.
Yeah. Because I've driven up here to talk to you.
Well, you got to go check out Cathedral Edge.
Yeah. I'm going to try to at least have a look at it.
Yeah, at least take a look at it.
It's covered in snow and ice at the moment,
it's going to look nasty.
Yeah.
But no, the White Mountains just have a great sort of subculture of the outdoor community. Everything's a little hardy around here because the weather is bad. We have sort of a long, variable winter. We have a great summer, but it can get, wet and like monsoon-like really any time of the year because we're so close to the Atlantic Ocean. And I think that is reflected in the community of outdoors people here. Folks embrace bad weather. It's not like namby-pamby, it might thunderstorm this afternoon. Which Gore-Tex should I bring? It's like, it's going to be crappy. Right. The rock's going to be wet.
Right.
Like, you go out even in sport climbing, you go out to Rumney and it's like, people are rock climbing in some pretty gnarly conditions.
Sure. No, yeah, I'm sure nothing that, us Westerners out in rifle or whatever would ever touch. We would just be like, no, today's out. Yeah, we're today's out. Like, forget it.
So that's always just like inspired me. And I think especially if you aspire to the big mountains, it gives you like a great background because you're trained up in shitty weather and shitty conditions. And so when you run into the wet rock pitch, in Patagonia or the Himalaya, like you've climbed a lot of wet rock.
Sure. I was just down at the AAC dinner and the K2, the 78 K2 expedition guys were there. And those, primarily it sounded like those are all, Pacific Northwest based guys in Seattle. So, and that, I feel like they have a similar thing. Yeah, they have a similar thing, but they have some altitude, not super high. Yeah. But they're striking distance into the Canadian Rockies as well. Yeah. And that seems like the only element here that's missing. But then everybody talks about how heinous these mountains are for their height, as it were, and they can be killers, and they can. I mean, literally, I just actually talked to Hugh Herr. Yeah. And so his near-death experience and one of his rescuers was killed rescuing him on Mount Washington. Yeah. So, it's just kind of like looking at it, it is this like little stew of kind of most of the right elements to create, burly mountaineers and burly alpinists.
And if you're from the East Coast and the Northeast and you're a young climber like me and you're feeling really drawn to the sport, there's a good chance you're going to end up in North Conway because this is sort of the best climbing there is and best concentration of it. And that's why, Dean Potter spent 2 or 3 years living here, working for Wild Things and just being a climbing bum before he moved out west. And so many other, great climbers have, Josh Wharton's another guy who was just out here for the Ice Fest, and he cut his teeth in New Hampshire before he set sail for Colorado. Right. So it's a great spot to be. There's good energy, and I love it.
So back to your evolution, I'm just gathering, like you're in your 20s, you're climbing bum, you're dabbling in all this sort of stuff, and then what about the creative projects? Because again, when I sort of re-encountered your name after, that
loud guy at the fire.
Yeah, that loud guy at the fire just wrote a book or whatever. So at some point or another, as one of these irons in the fire that you mentioned, you've become an author, you're working in video and all sorts of other creative projects. So can you maybe give an idea of the evolution of that, and if it started early, it started late, or where it occurred?
Well, it probably started with the grant applications, and then every grant you need a trip report, and I started working up as a guide in Alaska, on Denali and all the mountains around there for Alaska Mountaineering School. And that gave me the opportunity to try bigger routes up there and find some unclimbed stuff and, second ascents and sort of stretch myself a little bit more as an alpinist. And those climbs started getting noticed. And so I started, having more opportunities to write about my adventures. And one thing led to another, and I really liked writing, but it's hard for me to tell a lot of stories about myself. And so I'd much rather, be as a journalist or a storyteller focused on somebody else. And the book I wrote about K2 was sort of a big pivot in that direction.
What was that called?
That was called One Mountain, 1,000 Summits. And it was about a tragic day in 2008 when 11 climbers were killed going for the summit of K2 and returning from the summit. I wasn't there. I was actually in Colorado on a Mountain Hardwear gig, but it was immediately international news, CNN homepage. And as a mountaineer, anytime you see mountaineering, like it on the homepage of mainstream media, you kind of go, "Oh man, this isn't good."
Right? Yeah. It's, no, it usually is. It's usually not bad. Lately, there's been a couple. Like Honnold's made it so it was a good story, but
yeah, the Don Wall was a great story for the sport, but for the most part, it's not good news, and it's not. Often it's not told that well either. And I was just sort of starting to find my voice as a writer, and decided to just write a few blogs about it for the Huffington Post. And, they were analysis of what might have happened on K2, but they were also sort of like, there was a little bit of media criticism mixed in there, like comparing, different accounts and, maybe improper terminology that kind of muddies the water, stuff like that, stuff that climbers immediately notice.
Right.
And
it's like, it almost feels insurmountable. You just you can tell these outlets over and over again and stuff, and they just it seems like it bounces off their heads a little bit. But anyway, but death sells, and so they know that a mountaineering story involving fatality or sexy rescue is gonna get a lot of clicks and likes, and that sparked my interest in the story. I ended up writing a feature about it for Rock and Ice. And when I approached that, there were all these different accounts from the Western survivors that I had read, reported in different media outlets. And on the edge of those stories, there was always reference to these porters or Sherpas. Right. And it was totally vague, like I stumbled down and then a Sherpa appeared and gave me a bottle of oxygen and helped me find the way back to camp. Right. And because of my background as a guide, I know that people can be on the mountain at the same time and have very different experiences. We can be up on Mount Washington in a whiteout, and it feels like this epic, wilderness, but a guide knows exactly where the next cairn is and the cairn after that, and every twist and turn in the trail. And so I just kind of said to myself, man, who are these Sherpas? Who are these porters those are the guys I want to talk to and hear their recollection of what happened. And that was sort of the genesis of the book. So you're a pretty good writer. You've written all these reports. You're doing blogs. How was it to switch into and did you have the tools to switch into this a journalist mode, or were you kind of learning on the fly as far as what that would take to?
I was definitely learning on the fly. I mean, it's a hard job, and so all the criticism about the mainstream media, journalists are not people who need to be criticized a lot in this day and age. Right. So I have a lot of respect for people who have chosen that as a full-time profession. I should say that. And it was a great adventure for me. It felt every bit as exciting as going after a first ascent, just flying to Kathmandu with a list of guys I want to try to find. And it involves making friends, meeting people for coffee, getting introductions. It involves a lot of less than ideal communication because of the language background. I don't speak Nepali or Sherpa. But it was just totally engrossing. And it really fueled me for 2 years from when the accident actually happened and when my book was published.
What year was that it happened?
2008.
Right.
And then my book was published in 2010.
Because that was huge, but it's always compared with there's been tons of tragedy on that mountain, but where Rob Slater died and where
96 with Allison Hargreaves.
Right, and Allison Hargreaves, right. So I was kind of curious, I have this thing about Everest and it seems like the whole Everest thing's calmed down a little bit. We've had the Sherpa fight and and the earthquake and what happened with just all the ups and downs.
It's epic. It's been biblical.
Commercial guiding up there, and a lot of people have said to me, "Hey, man, you should have somebody on, that, and talk to them about that." And it's been difficult because it's what I call like the cult of Everest. Like everybody involved has a vested interest in making it seem like it's maybe like everyone's like, you need to get somebody who'll talk like about how it really is. And it's like, well, guides don't want to do that because they're selling this product. People who pay $75,000 or whatever to go do it don't want to do it because it diminishes, they want it remembered as this amazing accomplishment that was like,
sure.
And it is, but it's really, it's like, get the dirt or talk to somebody and it's hard, it's hard to get someone to come down and just be like, this is what it's really like. Was there any reluctance when you were talking to these Sherpas in terms of them protecting their professional aspirations in the mountains, like to be, just, not maybe be as forthright as they were, or did you find them to be?
Of course. The Sherpas, I mean, they have a lot of agency in everything that's gone on, on the highest mountains, both in the story I worked on K2 and everything that's happened on Everest. Mm-hmm. There are good Sherpas and bad Sherpas, and, they have their own interests, business interests, personal interests, egos, images to uphold, just like Westerners do.
Right.
And so that was a big part of my book was, breaking down this sort of Oriental, heroic imagery around the Sherpa.
Right.
And, we should say, if we're going to go into this, there's two definitions of Sherpa.
Right.
Sherpas are an ethnicity of folks from Tibet who migrated to the Khumbu Valley in the 16th century, but there were waves of migration. And eventually some Sherpas found their way to Darjeeling in the 1920s and got hired on to some of the original Mount Everest expeditions. Mm-hmm. And on the original expeditions, it wasn't just ethnic Sherpas. There were other tribal people who were part of the expedition, but the Sherpas actually were good business people and recognized that this could be a good gig. And they protested and staged walkouts very early in the 1920s and the 30s to kind of consolidate this job of being a mountain guide and porter in the high mountains of the Himalaya. And, when Tenzing Norgay and Hillary climbed Everest in 1953, Hillary took a photo of Tenzing on top, and there's controversy about why, there never was a photo taken of Hillary on top. Mm-hmm. So when that was like front page news around the world, and it said a Sherpa is standing on top of Mount Everest was the photo.
Right.
And that just sealed the deal for the Sherpas and gave them this tremendous business professional identity that has done great things for their culture, but it's brought a lot of change and heartache and tragedy.
And so the other definition
would be
the job.
Yeah, the job.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And I know, and it's interesting. I'm glad that you clarified that, because some people who are very sensitive to that, I think are always correct. Like, they're not all Sherpa. Sherpa are specific, but the word has come to mean, these local, high altitude climbing and guides and porters that are on the mountain, whether when you get down to it, they're one ethnicity versus another. Because over in K2, you've got the porters are generally
they don't have as good branding.
Right. Yeah.
They're called high altitude porters, or HAPs.
Right.
And
their branding's terrible.
Yeah, but I think it's like anytime you're talking about these sort of sensitive issues, it's important to talk about the words you're using and why, absolutely, because it just helps you explore why that subject is sensitive, maybe. And so,
well, and it's fraught. I mean, it's the history of mountaineering over there is fraught with the same sort of imperial separation of who's in charge and who's not in charge and who's better and who's that all, that whole century has fraught with it, and it continues to be. It continues, like you said, kept reading about these people on the fringes of you know, and they don't even have names. They're a Sherpa showed up there. You know what I mean? Like a Sherpa basically saved my ass. You know, you'd think you'd like know who he was or whatever. So I mean, it's fraught. So it's not like something that's some sort of like oversensitive thing to deal with, because the whole system is fraught with sort of a social stratification over there. So and I mean, South Asia is a place that fascinates me, and that was kind of what I studied in college, what I focused on, and I've been lucky to, spend a lot of time in Nepal, India, and Pakistan. And it's, the stories of the people there are just tremendous. And, I think everybody should go there and go to Nepal, go to the Himalayas, and, spend some money, hire local guides, and check it out for yourself. A lot of authors, or especially first-time authors, like they let something go that they're uneasy with. Yeah. Maybe, I mean, I think everybody probably does. I do it with just even, 3,000-word articles. Like, finally, I'm just like, all right, this thing's terrible, but I got to let it go or whatever. Yep. What were your feelings as you got to the end of it? And
pretty similar.
And found it in print, like sitting it in your hand.
Pretty similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot about the creative process, too. And I definitely wish I had more time to craft it, because it was so intense, and it was just an intense story, and that like people had died. It was intense for me because I was a first-time author, and it was intense because the publisher wanted to get it out there in a relatively speedy schedule.
Yeah, timely to the event.
Right. We knew that there were other books that were coming out, so they kind of said, hey, summer 2010 is really when, that we should launch this. So, all that said, the great thing about writing a book is it's something you can give to your mother.
Yeah, totally. No, I was thinking it's got to have been like...
Yeah, that's a really nice thing to be like, look, Mom, I accomplished something. Yeah. Beyond that, I don't know. It's tough to know. But I do think that at the time, there hadn't been a lot of focus on the Sherpas. There had been some for sure, but like the amount of books that were out there about the Himalayan mountaineering experience from the Sherpa perspective, there was like 3 or 4, but not tons. And since then, with everything that's happened on Everest, I think that it's nice to see people engaging with, the issue of having paid professional help on the world's highest mountains, in a more focused way.
Well, yeah,
having a dialogue.
I read the book, and the along those lines, it is important to remember that they're not this like. We have the tendency to talk about them as this like completely homogenous group of people that act as in concert, if you will, and that's just, I mean, that's like schema. That's like how you interpret the world, and
that's what got us into the Vietnam War.
Right, exactly. But it's hard to, just have the brain power to be individualizing the world. So it is a tendency to do that, whether it's Russians or Americans or, we do it in all these different ways. But, that I think was an important step in there, is that you're like, oh, these people are all different. And like you said, and then when there was this incident with was it Simone Moro, or how do you
Simone and Uli, and John, Griffith.
Again, it felt like they were all acting in concert, but then you're like, no, these, there's butthead Sherpas, and there's like cool Sherpas, and
there's hot-headed Sherpas who are quick to fight, and there's really like mellow Sherpas
who are like, come on, you guys get along, right? So and I think that's become, like you just said, more pronounced now to think about it all that way.
Yeah.
Although I think there's still a long ways to go, in terms of Western attitudes towards what goes on over there.
There is. And every year, I think, the original Sherpa families from the Khumbu, a lot of them have become economically very successful.
Right.
You know, they like, you know, these are guys who, you know, were working in expeditions in the 70s, 80s, 90s, invested that income in businesses, and now, you know, their family lives in Kathmandu and their kids are, you know, in college overseas, and they have, you know, built, you know, successful trekking companies, tea lodges, all sorts of different business ventures. So what's happening on Everest, I think, is that other ethnicities and tribes, you know, that aren't from the Khumbu are getting sort of pulled into doing sort of the low level sort of grunt work of, you know, moving stuff up a mountain is hard work. And, you know, it happens 1 kilo at a time, 1 step at a time. And it's freaking dangerous.
Right.
So I think it's an important issue to keep talking about.
What's germinated from that in terms of creativity? You know, was that like, did it burn you out for a while?
Oh yeah.
You're like, I want to just move back to the SAR site and hang out by myself again. No, but you know, again, this guy who's got, I think people think of like being a professional climber or whatever that means. In other words, you know, you don't have a day job, you're not in a cubicle, you're out there climbing in some capacity or in the outdoors. I think people think of it as one path. Oh, he's going to be a pro climber, or he's going to be a guide, or he's going to be, and you're explaining this whole like, boom, boom, I've got this project, these things happening. Yeah. You know, so the creative part of it is still part of all the things that you do now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Very much so. Yeah. You know, back in the day, it was really easy because I'd guide summers and winters,
right,
and Alaska in the spring. And then the rest of the time was like climbing trips. And it was pretty easy to like go to Patagonia for a month or 6 weeks, November, December, early January, work the winter back here in New Hampshire, and then go to Alaska for the spring. I started getting enough opportunities that instead of like working in Alaska, I'd like have a freelancing gig or be going on a mountain hardware expedition. So after 2010, after the book was published, I was really lucky to start teaming up with a new crew of alpine partners who were more people I had met professionally. And, you know, I consider like I'm an average climber, but I'm really lucky to have climbed with Uli Steck, Alex Honnold, Mike Lebecki, Ethan Pringle, and just had chances to, you know, witness like the guys who are true athletic studs doing their thing. And that's what you know, and then I was working on stories to pay for those trips.
Right. I wanted to cut back a little bit and talk. You had mentioned early on, I heard you say, like, I thought about being a guide, but that really wasn't me, but then you became one anyway. How was it that you ended up embracing that? Did you find that you were wrong about yourself in terms of your aptitude for it? And well, I mean, it seems like you would be an excellent, fun guide to have.
Yeah. No, I love guiding because I love teaching and hanging out with people. I didn't embrace it because I realized that to do it full time, you would have to do a lot of travel. And sometimes that can suck your motivation to travel for personal climbing and adventures. You
just want to be home when you're not working.
Yeah. And B, I realized that you are only as good as your day rate and the number of days you want to work a year. And, you know, it's an awesome career to be like I'm talking about a capital G guide who has the international pin and spends, 3 weeks in the Alps and, spring in Alaska, Red Rocks, who's hopping around. I have a lot of friends who do that. And I have a lot of respect for that, that career, but it didn't fit me. I'm a little too frenetic. That's a good career if you're a grinder, sort of. And I've always been, a little more, diverse and just sort of job to job and story to story. So the balance I struck ultimately was that I only want to guide here in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And I have a little mom and pop guide service I run with Bayard, and We have 3 or 4 staff guides who work for us on busy weekends, but it's a part-time business, mostly focused around winter climbing. And it's great because I get to guide 40, 50 days a year, and I also do a lot of ice festival work. So I get to teach people and I do a lot of beginner instruction and kids instruction. A funny thing about guiding is there's also a tendency to, like, as your career progresses, get drawn to, bigger, like high baller clients and harder, sexy routes. And my career trajectory has kind of been the opposite.
Right.
I work with college kids and veterans groups and spend a lot of time taking people out top roping and just teaching them like the ABCs of climbing. But for some reason that feels more fulfilling than, being focused on like the high end guiding.
Yeah, well, if you're home here in town and now you have a baby, a little toddler running around. I mean, those days you can come home from.
Exactly.
You get done at 5:30 and you say goodnight to everybody, and we'll see you in the morning, and I'll come home. So, I mean, those fit as well as being fun, or and I think and I was a guide for several years. Yeah. And frankly, you get into that higher end guiding, or what we would call that, and it's dangerous for you. Yep. It becomes, it's a dangerous profession, and it's really hard to like rock climb at a high level. Right. If you're doing a lot of mountain slogging, whether it's ski guiding, Grand Tetons in the summer, a lot of those kind of bread and butter gigs, it's hard to be like a 513 rock climber and keep your fingers strong and be like doing that kind of mileage. Right. Yeah. So it makes sense. But the other question I had, you just went through all these great climbers that you climb with, and you're one of these guys that a little self-deprecating in terms of your own abilities, and you're sort of like, I'm drafting on these guys or whatever. But what do you think it is about you that makes these guys who you claim, or I mean, Alex Honnold's better than all of us. Sure. What is it that makes you a good partner? Why do these guys keep, why do you have you run through these great climbers that you all had this great opportunity to climb with? Because they obviously wanted to climb with you. So the question, I guess, is basically, what do you think makes you a good partner in the mountains? Why do you think, what are you proud of in terms of your abilities? I think really it's just, being stoked and enthusiastic about getting out of the sleeping bag in the morning and trying to do something. Even if, the weather's 50-50 and you're probably going to like ski to the base of the route and decide it's not a good day. The one thing I've learned about, big mountain climbs is that you need to just keep chipping away at it. And if you're genuinely enjoy the process of, getting out and when it's cold and, going for some exercise and carrying your gear in a pack and whatnot, then you're just going to make your own luck to a certain extent, because it's impossible to predict, conditions in the mountains and what kind of day it's going to be. So it's like, one cardinal rule is like, you always want to go until sunrise and then look around. Right. And then decide, There's this term I learned in California that I've never really heard anyone ever using. I think I heard it from Bill Leventhal. Yeah. Is snail eye. And getting snail eye means that your little snail tentacles are like peeking out of your shell, and at the first sign of trouble you pull them back in. So totally. And getting snail-eyed means that you did that, and then the day turned out to be super nice, and you were like, I should have gone. So you're basically try to be immune to snail eye. I think that's and it comes because cold and just being uncomfortable, like that's not a big deal for me. And so a lot of athletes like fester in base camp because it's an unpredictable environment. They're not sure if they're going to get to climb
in 6 hours or 6 days.
Right.
And that just tweaks with people, especially if you're sort of an obsessive compulsive personality. I've always been able to just embrace that uncertainty and just have fun and be thankful for where you are, you know, farting, drinking coffee with your buddies in like a rainy base camp somewhere.
Right. Okay, one last thing. You have a little baby.
Yep.
Oh, not really. I mean, what do you call them? I guess they're toddlers now. I have one too.
Little monkey.
Yeah, little monkeys. She's just about a month older than mine. What was it in the evolution of your climbing and your life and who you are that told you guys it was time to do that? Because I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
A lot of climbers are allergic to, you know, giving up the focus on their lives for something like that. And we know them. We're friends with them. Yeah. And so you you know, in our case, it thrust itself upon us. Yeah. And you guys made a choice. So what was it that made it time to do that?
Well, I think, I mean, the thing I've probably been most lucky for is like my relationship with Janet, my wife, and she's a climber too. And we met back in 2003, 2004. We got married on January 1st, 2011. And we've shared incredible adventures with each other, going to, you know, places all over the world to climb and travel. And we also shared this adventure here in the Shabin, living like this for a bunch of years. And so having a, you know, offspring, it's one of those choices when, you know, you're in that kind of committed relationship. It just feels like, you know, part of the deal. You want somebody to take care of you when you get old. and somebody to, you know, keep you laughing and growing and all that stuff as you move into new phases in life. So it was something that we decided to do. And simultaneously to that, we decided to open a climbing gym with some friends. And sort of, I thought like, okay, if we're going to have a family, there's got to be a climbing gym we can go to, because that's going to be my...
So you have to build one.
Deal, right. Yeah. And so it turned out that, there wasn't a good one close to us, and one thing led to another, and we ended up opening a climbing gym and welcoming a little girl into the world in the same year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And thanks for sitting down. You actually have to go to the climbing gym or to take care of the young one pretty quick. So
can I also would like to say thank you to my sponsors who support me. And I really couldn't travel and piece it all together without their help. So principally that's Mountain Hardware, also Petzl, Cliff Bar, other brands, and also thank you, Janet.
Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. And thanks to Freddie again for having me into his home, his little home, but we are also in his new home up the hill as well, hanging out with this kid, doing a little bouldering on his indoor wall with his daughter, which was super fun. And I've never had anybody shout out their sponsors like that before, ever, I don't think. Maybe you guys remember sometime, but yeah, that's the kind of guy he is, man. It's pro sesh. Thankful for the support he gets and the work he does with those guys. If you want to help out the Enormocast, you can go to enormocast.com, my janky little 8th grade project website, and click on Help Out, and then do what it asks you. There's a few things you can do, including donate if you want. Also, remember to support our sponsors that help this show exist. It definitely would not exist without your help, but it would also not exist without their help. So it's a big, juicy pie of helping each other. So won't you take a bite? Speaking of helping each other, climbing is in full swing here in North America. Outdoor climbing, the spring is upon us, which unfortunately also means there's always a spring uptick in hearing about accidents. I think it's just a matter of volume. So many more rock climbers than ice climbers and stuff, at least in North America. So please, if you could wipe my social media clean from any reports of accidents, that would, the Enormocast could go into its grave happy and complete. I know it's not going to happen, but please, as individuals, make sure that you guys are checking your systems, communicating, looking out for each other. Try not to get so far and over your head that things go badly. And of course, I always say check your knot at the end of these things. And please know that that's not the end. It's only the start. Checking your knot is one thing I want you to do, but it's also a metaphor for checking everything that goes into the system. And as the Beastie Boys said, you also need to check your head.
Now, young man, what do you want to do with your life?
Actually, Matt, I kind of want to be a writer.
Well, la-de frickin' da! We got ourselves a writer here. Hey, Dad, I can't see real good. Is that Bill Shakespeare over there? Now, I wonder, Brian, from what I've heard, you're using your paper not for writing, but for rolling doobies.
The teachers told me that's where it's at. So